Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Just a Person podcast, a show that explores life's highs, lows, and in-betweens. I'm Madison, and this week I sat down with Leah. We talked about why she decided to learn Spanish as a second language, how that led her to study abroad and student teach in Honduras, and what differences she noticed between the culture there and in America. Thanks so much for listening, and enjoy the episode. Hi, Leah.
Hi, Madison.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Now, you are indeed the sister of Haley, who was our very first episode ever.
Yes.
Let me tell you 2 reasons why I'm excited for this conversation today. Number 1, because I have had bronchitis, as you know. Thank you for your patience with that. I am still a little phlegmy, so if I'm coughing or anything, but I'm happy to be able to breathe again, so that's exciting. And number 2, because I feel like you and I both always have like the weirdest things happen to us. So then every time we have a conversation, I feel like we're both always talking about like the most ridiculous things. So I'm excited to see what happens, like what's happened.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I think people are always like, that would only happen to you. But with you, like the conversation goes both ways.
You're right. Exactly. So I'm excited to get into it, but first we got to do our random question. Are you ready for that?
I'm ready.
So our question today is, what is a product that you stand by? Like you would die on the hill that this is the best product. For me, I can tell you mine first if it will give you, just to give you a little example. I chew a lot of gum. I always have. And I only like Extra, the brand Extra. I don't like any other kinds of gum. They don't have like any flavor to me.
Fascinating. Okay. I first initially drawn to name a bunch of food brands, like let's see, product brands.
It could be anything. It can be food. Let's do one food, one non-food.
Okay, I like that. My food brand, oh, so many good ones to choose from, but I guess the hill I would die on, the product I would promote would be Chobani. I'm a big Chobani fan.
Really?
Yeah, I know, weird. It's weird because I'm a little lactose intolerant and like most of their most of their products are dairy products, but they're quality dairy products.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm a big Chobani fan. And then, but non-food related product, CeraVe, and I might be pronouncing that wrong.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's like, I don't think anyone really knows how to say it.
Right, I would agree with that.
First of all, those are great. Love it for you.
Thanks.
Um, my my non-food product would be I love Adidas socks. Love them.
Oh yeah,
They're the
yeah, it's
best.
a good product.
I have only had those for like those are the only socks I'll wear. I mean, I'll wear other socks, sure. I'm not like a diva here about my socks because I don't even like to wear socks, but I only wear I don't know what it is. They're just so soft.
Are these like the mid-calf ones or the ankle ones?
No, the ankle ones.
Okay, okay.
No. I actually have like several variations of socks that are all Adidas because my parents just buy them for me for like my birthday or Christmas. But yeah, mostly just the ankle ones.
Okay.
Knee highs.
I know. I'm picturing you with like the bright orange basketball mid-calf.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's what I just wear on the regular. Um, okay, so we already know you have a sister, older sister, but why don't you give us just a little look at younger Leah, what her life was like growing up.
We were born in New Mexico. We collectively as a group. That is not. I was born in New Mexico. Haley was born in New Mexico. And then my younger sister and my younger brother were both born in Maine, and we're all 3 years apart. So that makes it easy to remember each other's ages. And then we lived in Maine for a little bit, and we all talk about this occasionally. We have very fond memories of Maine. Maybe you've heard that from Haley, but just generally great time out there on the East Coast. And then we moved to Michigan for my dad's job. And I feel like that was my personality for a while. Like the fact that I wasn't from Michigan was my my personality in Michigan. It was just very different moving from East Coast to the Midwest. The Midwest definitely has its own personality, and that was really tough to get used to as a kid.
Yeah, I can imagine. How old were you when you moved here?
I was only 8, so I couldn't like look at it from the like philosophical point of view, but yeah, still it was weird.
I feel like that's such an odd age to move because you're aware of things, but you don't, like you said, you don't have like a grasp on what's going on, but you're much more aware than, say, probably your younger sister was.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, what I love about your family is also when you were growing up, you guys had exchange students. Or did you just have one or did you had several?
No, we had 3. And then we have one right now, so 4, I guess.
See, and your family is already kind of big as is. There's already 6 people in the house. You have pets, you have exchange students, and it's always like in the best way, a little bit crazy, like a little bit chaotic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And one of our personal favorite memories together was your older sister, Haley, she has diabetes, and we went to a diabetes walk, me with your family. And we came back and you guys had bought, your mom and dad had both separately bought donuts. Didn't know the other one did. And for so, like, I don't know why you guys do this, but you guys quarter up your donuts. So I guess you can all sample.
Exactly. You have to try them, you know? You don't just want to be stuck with like one donut. You want to try multiple donuts. So,
So then we're sitting there with like 2 dozen quartered up donuts. Oh man, that was a good
yeah,
time.
yeah,
After we just came from a diabetes walk, Leah.
right. The irony. No, those 2 dozen donuts, I don't even think lasted us that whole day. Like, I think they were gone before yeah.
But we definitely just needed to squeeze that in there because that is for sure one of our fondest memories.
That is a core memory.
But okay, so you went to high school, we went to high school together, and then you graduated, decided to go to college. Where'd you go? What'd you decide to do?
Yeah, so my college years were kind of untraditional in that I went to Ball State in Indiana for my freshman year. It's about 4.5 hours away in some really small town in Indiana. And right from the bat, I wanted to study education, but I spent a year at Ball State and I really did not like it. It wasn't quite what I was expecting. So I ended up transferring after a full year there, and I transferred to Calvin, which was a lot closer to home, which is something I thought I would never do. That was kind of a shock that I wanted to be closer. It was kind of like a big thing for my friends and I, like all to get out of the town that we had gone to high school in. Like that was a measure of success. So it was weird coming back. But then I started my career at Calvin and then COVID hit. So then I had like, as everybody did, a couple years of weird, weird college experience. And then I did commuting for a while. So yeah, it was like you said, chaotic in the best way, very non-traditional.
When you're in high school, you had gone on a trip to Honduras. Really liked it. What did you like about it?
I loved that, and I talk about this all the time when people ask me, the pace of life was like a little bit slower. And I'm sure some of that comes from being a visitor and not living there, but I think honestly, life just moves a little bit slower. And not to say like they're not getting things done down in Honduras or like life is not moving along, but there's less emphasis on kind of all the little busy things that we get caught up in. I get caught up in here having to do like I don't know, the important things got done, but in a slower pace.
Okay, like it wasn't, everything wasn't like rushed. I need to get as much done in one day as possible.
Exactly.
Okay. So then when you were in college, you ended up going back there to study abroad.
Yeah, I did. It was super awesome. I had always said I wanted to go back. So it was really awesome when the opportunity presented itself. So I got to do, well, I went back during COVID year, which we had talked about. So it was kind of, once again, untraditional during a summer semester. And it was not through the university, technically. It was planned by the professor. And we went for 4 months, I think.
So well, I guess first of all, we should mention you were majoring in elementary education and Spanish.
Yes.
Was it your intention to teach Spanish or to teach at a Spanish school, Spanish speaking school?
That's a great question. I actually did not intend to teach Spanish. I had always assumed I would kind of shy away from that because I am not Hispanic. So I always thought like that would be so hard for me to teach that. I don't have the background, the culture, all of that. So I got the major kind of envisioning teaching English in a Spanish setting.
Oh, okay. That makes it. So like going somewhere. Would you want to then like live abroad and teach English?
Yeah, I thought about that for a long time, and I still consider it. So that would be something I would like to do.
And when you were there just studying, how does it work, first of all, when you're not studying through the university? And then what kinds of classes were you taking?
I just a little shout out to my Spanish professor because she pulled all kinds of strings, whether or not like legal, I mean not like illegal, but like allowed up to par with university standards. I don't know. Like we would tell her, okay, I need, 20 Spanish credits in one semester to
What?
graduate, which is right, which is completely irrational. And she'd be like, just done. Like she would be rubbing her hands. She'd be like, I got it. So she got stuff done. We didn't ask questions about how she got it done, but she did. she she did do the work behind the scenes. I was studying, still taking education classes, but a lot of the credits that I took there were exclusively towards my Spanish major, so it would be like Spanish history, like language linguistics type of classes.
So you came back and you got into your senior year. You were a few months from graduation. You're going to graduate in December, right?
Yes. No, I was going to graduate in the following fall is what I had thought.
Okay, and they told you you weren't going to graduate on time, and then they told you that you were.
Right.
Right. Okay. So what happened there?
Little fun little plot twist. So this could be blamed on a million things. I'm sure there were things that I missed as well as a student, but I was at a advising meeting and all of a sudden we're like going through my classes, we're doing the whole 4-year plan setup, whatever. And she's looking at the next semester, my advisor, and she's like, huh. She's like, I don't know really how many classes you have to take. Like, I think you could graduate. Granted, this was like 3 weeks before the new semester started. And all of a sudden, she's telling me that I can do my student teaching the following semester. And if anybody is on the education track, especially at Calvin, they know that that process is grueling in that it takes like 3 months to get approved, to find a placement, to submit all the documents you need, CPR, all this kind of stuff that you have to have ready. And I did not because I did not think I was going to be student teaching.
So what was your solution to that?
Yes, my solution was to pick the hardest possible route for myself. I had wanted to do my student teaching abroad and I was really adamant about that. And so they were like, oh God, I was probably such a headache for the Board of Education because they were like, really? So not only did I have to figure out a placement to do my student teaching, but I had to figure out a placement abroad. And so luckily there was a group from Calvin already going to Honduras in the following semester. And I turned back to the same Spanish professor and I was like, all right, baby, we gotta get it done in 3 weeks. What can you do for me? And so we went to Honduras. I had to present it to the board, like this whole 11-page approval thing. It was a nightmare. But we got it approved. And I arrived in Honduras without a place to stay and without a teaching without a teaching placement. And she was like, don't worry, we'll figure it out. And we did.
How?
Yeah, we literally like knocked on school doors. Like went around and were like, "Hey, will you take this like this American student teacher?" So I ended up in a Christian school pretty close to the university where the other students were studying, where I had studied previously. And because like they were really excited to have me because they didn't have enough teachers. So instead of actually getting a student teacher experience. They actually gave me a small class of the 13 students, virtually, by the way, because they were still kind of in the throngs of their their severe pandemic. And so, yeah, that was like, yeah, that was a lot.
So you just show up in a foreign country and go knocking on doors and just become a teacher.
It's essentially.
That's so funny.
I know.
Classic Leah.
I know, right?
So when you were there the first time, I guess it probably depends on how bad COVID was, but was like the experience much different? Not the first time you were there, but when you were studying there compared to when you were teaching there, was like the actual living experience there much different because you were like basically working as opposed to being in college?
Yeah, I think it was a big difference. One of the main things was the first time we went with a group of 5 girls in the summer. There were 5 of us. And the second time I went, there were 18 of us, I think. So even just in the number, like the dynamic was really different. So for example, when I went with the 5 girls, we really learned the language because we decided right from the beginning, okay, we are not going to speak English to each other unless we are getting coffee because we like you have to make like at some point during the day you have to be able to say, hey, like I lost my keys on the bus and I don't know what to do. Like sometimes
Did you do that?
you can't I did do that, I did do
Right,
that.
okay.
Sometimes you can't communicate that in Spanish, so you do need that English time, you know. But it was really good because it was such a small group. We could really hold each other accountable, which was sometimes actually super annoying because you'd be like, oh my God, like we've been hiking for 12 hours. I don't want to, like, my friend's correcting me, my Spanish grammar right now.
Right.
Come on. But it was really helpful and I'm really grateful for that. And then with the 5 of us, we were left on our own a little bit more because it wasn't a university formally sanctioned thing. So there weren't as many like trips scheduled for us. So we kind of had to make our own trips. And so that allowed us to like really socialize with the community where we were living. Our professor lived in like a town 30 minutes away. So we were really kind of on our own and we had to go out and meet the people around us and they brought us to events and things like that. So it was really good for socializing in the community that we were in. And that was something I feel that in the larger group we didn't get to experience as much.
Did you live with these groups of people or where were you staying?
So we all got a host family individually with the 5 girls. So we all had different host families. And I gotta tell you, that was just one of the best, like some of the most outrageous stories about these. Oh, and at like having been part of a host family in the past and now having been the student, I was like, oh my God, we did so many things. These poor former exchange students. But anyways, and so then the second time I went, because the group was bigger, I lived with 2 other students in the same host family that I lived with the first time. So that was cool. I got to come back.
Besides the pace of life, what were some big differences you noticed culturally between there and America?
One of the biggest things was the way we kind of like carry ourselves. And I've been trying to think of a different way to put that. But for example, especially when I was doing my student teaching, like I would come down for breakfast in the morning at like 5 a.m. Madison. And my host mom would be like, there's no way. Like, I would have my hair in a ponytail or something. She was like, there's no way you're going with your hair like that. Like, she would call her daughter over and her daughter would straighten my hair right there at the breakfast table. Like it was like you carried yourself, especially if you were in any kind of professional setting, and it didn't matter what kind of professional setting it was, whether you were going to be like cleaning the hospital or working in the hospital, you carried yourself with the same kind of self-respect and dignity, and like the way you presented yourself was very important. And that I think surprised me because you would often, when you think of America as like a first world country or whatever, having all these resources and being on the wealthier end, you're like, why don't we carry ourselves
Yeah.
like I remember I first re-entered the United States in Florida at an airport. And that had to be the biggest moment of cultural shock that I have ever experienced. Like just looking around at the people in Florida, I was like, oh my God, everybody's a mess.
Especially at an airport, people are like in their pajamas, no one cares.
No, for real. I'm like coming for the entire state of Florida. No, I'm kidding. Because I do it too. Like I go to the grocery store, my sweats, but yeah, it's different.
Were there any other big things that you can remember?
I think the humility and the gratitude there, I didn't feel like there was any entitlement. Everybody worked really hard and were really grateful for what they got. Regardless, there was no like, I studied for 4 years, so I should, be at the top of the career market or whatever. I don't know. It was just really, really grateful for what they got. And the religion was being Catholic and going to experience Catholicism in a different country. It was really reverent there.
Were those all things that you noticed all the times that you had been there, or was it the more time you spent, the more you could tell the differences?
I think the more time I spent, generally for the most part, the lack of entitlement I definitely got right away. But the dress and the carrying yourself kind of thing, I didn't get until I came back. And then I was like, oh, whoa, there's the difference.
Were there ways that people, not maybe in the way they treated you, but like I'm sure whenever you're from somewhere and you think about people from somewhere else, you have like your own like what you think they'll be like. Did people treat you like any sort of certain way just because you're American? I mean, I'm not saying they treated you badly. I'm saying like I feel like people have kind of preconceived notions about Americans.
Oh, for sure. The first time, like, so you get there, you can't really speak Spanish comfortably yet. I was trying to talk to my siblings and it'd just be super awkward. I remember the first conversation that wasn't awkward because I had actually learned a little bit of Spanish. My host sister was like, "Okay, so do you eat McDonald's every day?" And I was like,
Yes.
"No, actually haven't had McDonald's in like 2 years." So that was I laughed at that. I think there's a perception there, and I guess I can't speak for the whole population, but it's just from my host family that Americans generally have more money, which I think is valid for the most part. And then I think being American, being Caucasian, afforded me with a lot of like, well, definitely a lot of privilege. So it was funny in the second group we had a girl whose parents are from Mexico. She lives in Michigan now. But so she's like has Mexican ethnicity. And so it's funny. I would go and I would say like the most basic sentence in Spanish and they would be like, "Oh my God, like that's amazing. You're incredible. You speak two languages. Wow, wow, wow." Whereas they kind of expected it from her, like without even knowing her history, they just took one look at her and were like, "Okay, like speak Spanish." So, but I don't think that's exclusive to Honduras. I think that's pretty generic.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people, if you're not white, they expect you to speak the language of whatever your like ethnic background is, which isn't really a fair.
Yeah, and definitely being white, like the bare minimum, and everyone's like, "Oh my
Yeah, you're
God,"
like, hola.
right? They're like, "Wow, that's amazing."
Okay, so on the flip side of that question, I'm kind of curious, did you have any like preconceived notions about Honduras, or do you think like Americans do?
Oh, totally, totally. And I think like implicitly notions that I didn't necessarily want to have, but I did going into it, especially with a third world country, you go in with expectations that you have more to offer. I mean, not in like an arrogant way, like, "Oh my God, I'm coming to give you all these things." But I think one of the things I really appreciate about them, and my host mom was really awesome. She would always say, like, "There's not a lot in this house, but there is a lot of love." And she was so right. Like it was such a house full of, I mean, like everybody lived in this one house, like aunts, cousins, tons of people in the same house. And it was just like, I mean, we were talking at the beginning about how chaotic my house is. And I remember coming back to my house after being in Honduras and thinking like it's so quiet here. Like where are all the people?
How many people lived there?
Oh gosh, I think at least 13.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that is quite a bit more than that's like double yours.
Yeah, so like we were definitely bumping elbows, but it was really good. I mean, we would just come sit on the couch and like there was always someone to talk to. Everyone's always so willing to help each other. So I think I didn't expect to look at that and be like, "Man, that's almost better in a sense." If that makes sense.
Now, in terms of like your job, well, because you learned while you were there and you also taught while you were there. So from like a school perspective and also from you've worked in America and then worked there, what are like the kind of similarities and differences in terms of studying and also like their school system and also working there?
I'll start with the school. It was during COVID time, so all of our classes with the Honduran students were virtual. We had some that were in person with just us five, like a Calvin professor from Honduras, if that makes sense. But one of the big differences was just how the students all rallied to really help us out. And again, that could be like a foreigner coming in. I don't know if they help each other out like that necessarily. Maybe they do, but like from day one, we got messages individually from like every classmate that was like, "Hi, my name is da da da. Let me know if you need help with anything."
See, and I feel like that is something that Americans wouldn't necessarily do.
Yeah, I mean, I thought about like in Calvin, we have students from all over, and I never reached out and offered to help. And so that was I was like, oh, okay, wow. And it really mattered. Like it made you feel so good that someone was looking out for you because you're going in thinking like this is gonna if I ever have to unmute my mic, Lord help me, like I don't know what the heck is going on. So it's so nice to know that like people in the class had your back as opposed to being ready to laugh at you when you say something completely outrageous because you didn't understand what you were saying.
What about like, because now you live in New Mexico and you teach, is there a difference in the students even when they're kids?
I think the biggest difference I have noticed is kind of in how the parents interact with us. The kids are a little bit more disciplined generally if in Honduras they were a little more disciplined. And I think that came from the home environment, like just the way you were taught to respect your teachers and the way you were taught to act in a school setting, because those were things that I didn't have to necessarily go over with them. Like they came in with that. So yeah, that's one of the big things I noticed. And the parents would just really kind of deferred to you and spoke to you very respectfully. Not that, parents here don't, but cases vary, so it was a little different that way.
What age were you teaching there?
I was teaching third grade.
Okay, because here you teach kindergarten, right?
Right.
What I think is interesting, so you live in New Mexico, you came back, you graduated, all that. Um, and which you don't have to share that, but that's a whole other thing. Um,
Another chaotic little story.
um, but you came back here and you moved there and you teach a kindergarten class, which is bilingual. So what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, so me saying that I didn't want to teach Spanish, and here I am teaching Spanish. It's been really interesting. I have a teacher's aide who is from Mexico, and she has been like super helpful. I kind of bring the teaching academic background, and she really helps me if with the cultural pieces and things like that. So we like both work together to incorporate both into the classroom, which is really nice. It's amazing. And I did like I had been studying bilingual education throughout my 4 years at college, so I kind of anticipated this, but it's a whole other thing when you start to see 5-year-olds. You give them an instruction in Spanish, entirely in Spanish, in front of their parents, and their parents look at them like, what? And they can respond to that instruction. Like that's kind of an amazing thing to see. And they don't even realize it's like second nature to them. So that's been a really cool thing for me to see.
So is the purpose of this to teach English speakers how to speak Spanish?
Essentially. So it's kind of like right now in kindergarten, it's a 90-10 model. So 90% of the instruction is in Spanish, and it's not necessarily exclusively for English speakers. Like I have two students who have native Spanish speakers in their house. So it's kind of for both.
Interesting. And I'm sure that, well, that's kind of nice for you because it's like what you were saying when you were living with those five or those other girls, that you guys spoke mostly Spanish and then sometimes English. Because I mean, everyone that's taken a foreign language class in high school, like, that's a very basic thing, but like when you're learning another language or like having to try to speak another language, it like it makes you like tired.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know if we have that around here, but I mean, I don't think there is a better time to teach someone another language than when they're a kid.
Definitely agree. They like pick up things so quickly at that age.
Do you feel like now that you've done all this, you're pretty fluent, or is it still a little bit of a struggle?
No, I don't think I will ever, and this is a conversation I've had with a few people. I don't think I will ever come to the point where I'm comfortable to say I am fluent because, and then people could argue like, what's your definition of fluent? But the Spanish language varies so much that there's so many different words for different things. And so I'm just like constantly learning. That sounds so cliche, but I'm just constantly learning and improving a little bit. So I don't think I'm definitely getting better as we go, but I don't think I'm fluent. I can teach and hold a conversation.
No, that's a good point though. I've been thinking about that a lot actually. I've been trying to also learn another language and even just thinking about like English. Because I think sometimes when you're learning another language, it feels like so structured and confusing. But then you think about how like the language you speak now is not like that. And so it doesn't have to be that way. But even in English, like there's so much slang, there's so many words I just don't even know that are English. I don't know. I would say if you can hold a conversation, like that's pretty good because even in English, like I'm always like, oh, what does that mean? You know what I mean? And you don't think about it because we're both fluent English speakers. But I think I'm not trying to make you say you're fluent or something. I'm just saying, like, I think at a point you know as much as you can know, and then you just are always, even in English, like always just learning.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Do you find that since you can speak these two languages, do you ever get confused about what, like you're maybe looking at like a chair and you're like, what is like even speaking English, like what is that? You just like can't figure it out.
Yeah, and bilingual speakers say this all the time. My assistant and I talk about this all the time is you will not lose, but completely blank on words in both languages. Like half the time yeah, like you said, look at stuff and I'll be like, I do not know what the English word for that is. Like, what is that? Or I will respond to things in Spanish because it's a little more fluid or it makes more sense to my head. So yeah, it's a weird thing to navigate. But they say if you start to kind of have that, then you're getting better in your second language. So I was like, yay, I don't know what that is in English. Let's go.
Yeah, because my cousin is married to someone who her parents are from Mexico. So they both speak Spanish fluently. Like that's how she grew up with them speaking Spanish. So she speaks Spanish and English. So she kind of has that a lot. Or like if she's talking on the phone to her parents, they'll speak in both Spanish and English. Just because it's like you said, like they're just switching back and forth, like whatever makes the most sense. And I've always thought that was really interesting because it's like your mind is just holding all this information. It just gets it out in whatever way it can.
Yeah, yeah.
My last question for you. I like to ask for advice for the last question. So, what advice would you give to somebody that wants to study abroad or work in another country?
Okay. I was like, my first advice is not to do anything that I have done. Um,
Do
just kidding.
everything completely the opposite.
I think my biggest piece of advice for studying abroad or even working in another country is bringing a bit of humility to it and being able to laugh at yourself because there's going to be so many times when you just look like an idiot or it's super embarrassing and you kind of just have to humble yourself and recognize, okay, this is not like the space that I'm most comfortable in. So I kind of just have to lean into the discomfort and be okay with the fact that I'm looking like an idiot right now. And I think if you accept that and you kind of lean into it, like it improves your relationships with the people around you and makes the experience generally a lot better.
Yeah, that's good advice. Yeah, because even if you went to like, let's say like England or Australia or just some other English speaking country, everything is just different, you know? Even in America, if you go to like a different region, things can be very different.
Right. I think it's so important to just be like, I don't know, like I'm not used to this, and that's okay.
like you moving from Maine to Michigan, maybe just be like, okay, well, I'm learning new things. Like this can be fun and probably also embarrassing, but
Right. Like, what do you mean you guys don't quarter your donuts? What are you talking about?
I think that's just unique to you, Leah. I don't think.
The jury's still out on that. The jury's still out on that.
Please, if anyone out there has ever done that, let me know.
Yeah, I second that. It makes a lot of sense to me. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Um, was there anything that we didn't that we didn't cover that you would like to talk about or say?
No, I think if you had to rate Haley's episode versus my episode, I'm just kidding.
Hmm.
I'm just kidding, Madison. Oh my God, there goes the recording. That's crazy. No,
Whoops,
I
I
think
lost your
we got
episode, I
it.
think.
So I think we got most everything.
Well, thanks so much for doing this. I had a great time. It was as silly as I knew it would be and as informative as I'd hoped. It is interesting that you have been on both the host family side and the exchange student side. I'd never thought about that, but that is interesting.
Yeah, and now my family's like, we get it. You're an exchange student. Because I'm like, listen, when I was in exchange, they're like, stop.
Now that has become your whole personality.
Yeah, right. Right.
All right, well, thank you again, and we'll talk to you later.
Yeah, bye, Madison.
Thanks so much again to Leah for being on the show this week. If you have a story you want to personally share on the show, want to be read on air, or a topic you'd like to see discussed, find us on Instagram and Facebook at JustAPersonPod, or send us an email at justapersonpod@gmail.com. And we'll see you next Monday with another new episode.